Falcons won in overtime against the Buccaneers a couple of weeks ago. Kirk Cousins passed for over 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. To me, the matchup that matters is Todd Bowles versus himself, because simply put, this cannot happen again. And I don't know what Todd Bowles is going to do differently this time. I mentioned when we were talking about the Minnesota Vikings that Todd Bowles has blitzed more than any other team in the NFL. 216 times he has blitzed this year. That is more than every single team. Do they still stay aggressive? Are they going to just try to the same game plan really against the Atlanta Falcons and say, okay, but this time we're going to play it better. This time we're in the creamsicles. This time we're at home. This time it's actually going to work. And maybe it will, right? You got Antoine Winfield Jr. back. You've got some guys on the defensive line back. Elijah Cansey is back. So maybe they do think that, hey, we just now have the horses to finish the race this time around, and the game plan will be the same. But to me, it's a Todd Bowles thing, because you're also coming off of a week where they were terrible against the Ravens. They guys wide open everywhere. Todd Monken had Todd Bowles in a blender in that game, and I get it. Lamar Jackson's on the other side. It's tough to contain him, but 41 points as quickly as they were able to get up there, and Bucs started that game off 7-0, and then holy cow, it felt like it was out of hand very quickly after that, and that's the defense. So what does Todd Bowles do here? Is he going to continue to be his aggressive self against the Atlanta Falcons, especially since it did not work just a couple of weeks ago? We will see. What about you? What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes along with that. It's the Bucs defensive line in particular against the Atlanta's offensive line, and that's for the reason that I fully expect Todd Bowles to be aggressive. This is who he is. This is what his scheme is. Those blitzes need to get home. Those guys up front need to get pressure because of the fact that you do have injuries on the back level of this, and those got exposed against the Ravens. So you have Jamel Dean that's on IR, and this is something that I feel like the best way to prevent explosive plays, which they have not really been great at doing up until this point, is that blitz, that pressure, everything up front needs to get home. And you do have the horses this time to make that happen. You do have Elijah Cansey next to Vita Vea. You do have Antoine Winfield Jr., who can be a factor in that pass rush. He's not necessarily on the defensive line. I know that. But this is the thing that is the calling card of Todd's defense. And I think what the biggest thing has been, and what they actually did well in that game against the Ravens in the first half, that's the caveat, they shut down Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry had a very quiet night that first half. It wasn't until the second half where he broke off that long run and then all hell broke loose. Mm-hmm. But this is how Todd Bowles defenses are built. They're built to stop the run first, make offenses one-dimensional, and then get home with the blitz when that quarterback starts to hold the ball more and more, trying to get chunk plays. That is the formula for what this defense is. That is the formula that is going to have to work this time. So that if that formula is going to work, I think a lot of it hinges on the defensive line, because that is the strength of your team right now.
My plus factor in this one is Jalen McMillan, their rookie wide receiver. I had a lot of high hopes for Jalen McMillan going into the season. I really liked his tape at Washington over the last 2 years. It felt like he would really fit in well with this team as their wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. Well, now you're wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, basically. And I think that Sterling Shepard's probably going to be the wide receiver 1 just because of what he has shown over the last couple of weeks and his chemistry with Baker Mayfield. But I think they really like Jalen McMillan. And unfortunately for him, it's been a little bit of a struggle here in the early parts of his NFL career. Kind of has been a little bit for all three of these Washington guys. Rome Odunze's had his moments, but Jalen Polk's been really struggling with New England as well. And Jalen McMillan has here in Tampa Bay. 48.2 receiving grade for Jalen McMillan so far this season. He's got 3 drops already and just a 13% threat percentage. Now, when Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are in the game, it makes sense why that threat percentage is going to be a little bit lower. So we'll see what it's like moving forward and how much they really trust him and how much Baker Mayfield and Liam Cohen really trust him. But with no Mike Evans for the next couple of weeks, no Chris Godwin for the rest of the season, it's hard to look at this Buccaneers offense and think that they have enough firepower to be there in the end when it comes to winning this division and making a legitimate run in the playoffs, a little bit of like what they did last year. I think the players that hold the key to that, one of them is Jalen McMillan and him really stepping up starting this week. What about you?
Yeah, I had Jalen McMillan, and Trey Palmer kind of has shown flashes over the last couple of years, but I actually think I might switch it up given that we just talked about Jalen. I think this offense now is going to become one of those run first offenses, because where is the health of this team now? It's in the offensive backfield. And you
Sure.
saw all three of those guys now between Bucky Irving, and you saw Rashad White finally kind of get more involved a little bit. These are the and Sean Tucker. These are the guys that are going to be the ones I think that this offense now runs through. And it's not, I wish I could tell fantasy owners like, oh, well, hitch your horse to these two guys or this one guy. I don't think it's going to happen like that. If you look at that game against the Ravens, they got a pretty even split as far as carries go. But I think that that's a huge strength then of this offense, is that you don't necessarily know which guy, especially if you trot out more two-back sets, more of those pro sets in this offense. Can Liam Cohen adjust that as much in this game and give the Atlanta defense multiple runners to contend with? And then we know what Baker Mayfield is capable of on scrambles and kind of getting some more yards himself with his legs. That could make this a truly kind of dynamic run game, which we haven't seen in Tampa, by the way, in years. I've been really encouraged with just how much this run game has improved under Liam Cohen and how much more diversified it's become. I think that that's going to be a huge factor. And so maybe I'm changing my plus factor to just the offensive backfield. And if you can kind of run this offense through them and be productive at the same time.
And I think you're right, because you talk about, hey, where are the strengths of this team if the wide receivers are down? Not only is it in the backfield, it's in the offensive line as well. This is a really good offensive line that's really coming together very, very well. And I think they're really understanding how they need to run the ball. And when I say that, I mean, zone blocking scheme plays versus man and gap blocking scheme plays and sort of the chemistry that sort of goes into that, because it felt like they were sort of playing with both sides to start the season. Now they're leaning a little bit more towards what they do well, which I think is between the tackle runs. Yeah. These running backs are really responding. We saw the great Sean Tucker game. Bucky Irving's been fantastic. And I think Rashad White certainly is good as an all-around back as well, to have a three-headed monster there for them. So I agree, and we'll see. Maybe we are focusing a little bit too much on how they're going to replace things in the passing game, and we talk about wide receivers, they're going to need to step up. Maybe it is them becoming a little bit more of a run-dependent team, which is not a bad thing. Maybe a little bit less explosive, but if you can still impose your will on the ground on your opponents, that can mean a lot. And you're going up against a defensive line that has struggled this year in the Atlanta Falcons. So we'll see if that's their game plan, and if that really can be the tie that changes here for them.